Hi, I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the Senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville. Welcome to this week's edition of Kibbitzing with Kagan. With me today was going to be Amir Elichai, the CEO of a company called Carbyne that does really important work on 911 and on next generation 911. Because of the attacks on Israel, because it's an Israeli-based company, because he is a former member of the intelligence service in Israel, he is focused elsewhere. And so with me instead is someone I know and know well, my buddy, Karima Holmes. Karima, thank you so much for pinch hitting at the last second and for talking to us today about Carbyne and about Next Gen 911.
Thank you, Senator. Any chance to talk to you.
Thank you. Well, I was going to start with Israel and the attacks. So can you just please talk about where the company is based and how are things going so far over there? Is everybody safe?
Sure. So thank you, first of all, for acknowledging that and acknowledging this devastating event that has happened here around our company, around our employees. So thankfully, Carbyne is based in the United States now. We are based out of the New York office in New York City. So our CEO, our CTO, and a lot of our team, actually the majority of our team is in the United States, but we do have a hub in Tel Aviv. And so right now, I definitely want to send out love and blessing to that group. Thank you for acknowledging them, but they are safe. Their families are being kept up with, and our company is still strong. All of our technology is here US based, so we're proud of that. It's mostly our R&D development that's out of Tel Aviv, but we are keeping up with them. Thank you.
Yes, R&D, research and development.
Research and development.
So before shifting into Carbyne, then we have to do Karima Holmes. So you and I know each other because you ran the DC 911 Center, the Public Safety Answering Point. Just wanting to say that might be called later as a PSAP. That's the 911 Center. You are an extraordinary and well-known, well-respected leader in the field of 911. Why don't you talk briefly about your history with 911 and then how you got to Carbyne?
Sure. So I grew up in 911. I started as a call taker when I was 19 years old, which was a long time ago. I am now in my 40s, but I started in Augusta, Georgia as a 911 call taker, moved up the ranks there, went through school, and I ended up staying there for about 12 years, got up to the interim assistant director, went to Dallas in 2012 and ran a regional 911 center for about 3 years. Where we handled 3 cities in Southwest Dallas County, Texas. And then I came to DC in 2016, and I was with that 911 center for about 7 years. And then the beginning of this year, just like a lot of people, I looked at the changes and I was like, what can I do next? And I thought, let me try out this private sector. And so I am now the VP of Public Safety at Carbyne, and my job is really just to link Carbyne to the industry, link the industry to Carbyne, and just continue to develop 911, which is my ultimate flight in my career.
Nice. Well, first off, DC is a monumentally challenging place to work in 911. Give us a sense of something you were pretty proud of that you accomplished in DC.
Sure. So DC is 3.5 million calls for service. There's about 400 employees
per year.
3.5 per year. Half of are non-emergency and half are emergency. If I had to think about what was my most proudest of something that just I carry with me since I left there, when I got to DC, the agency was short. This was before previous administrations. The mayor we have now, Mayor Bowser, and I sat down when I was coming in and she said, what can we do to make this center better? And I said, we need more people. The agency was short. The mayor gave me the resources to hire more employees. And then the second piece of that is we created a huge training program. As you know, Senator, I saw that everything that you've done for the state of Maryland, how important training is for 911 call takers. And we created the agency's first Office of Professional Standards and Development to do just that, train the call takers and dispatchers.
Nice. So in Maryland, in law, we have called them 911 specialists. They are not just call takers. They don't just answer the phone or just dispatch. They are specialists and they save lives and property every single day. And I describe them as the courageous women and men under the headset.
Absolutely.
So give the viewers and listeners, please, an idea of what Carbyne is and what it does. Why I'm having
Sure.
a conversation with you, because you guys do some really important work.
We do. So Carbyne started out of Israel about 8 years ago, and we came over to the United States about 6 or 7 years ago. And we are a provider of cloud native call handling solutions for 911 centers. We basically provide the hello to units are on the way, right? So once you answer the phone, all of the software that's needed for you to handle that call, process that call with the addressing. We include video and picture in our software all in one platform. So a call taker can handle their call from the beginning to the end until it's ready for dispatch.
Fantastic. Let me just do my little disclosure here, disclaimer, which is this Kibitz is not an endorsement of Carbyne or its products. There are competitors and all that, and it's not for me to say that. But let's talk about the study that Carbyne did in partnership with NENA, the National Emergency Numbers Association. It found some really shocking statistics. Why don't you give the overview of the study, and then I have a lot of questions about it.
Sure. So the study was done, as you said, in collaboration with the National Emergency Number Association. And we put the survey out across NENA's entire base, and also Carbyne sent it out to our contacts in the industry. And we got a response from just about every state in the country. We had a 911 center or someone from a 911 center respond, where we got close to 1,000 respondents. And we found out, honestly, Senator, what I think we all knew, but we just hadn't really put in paper. Yes. And the biggest thing that came out of that was that over 80% of the 911 centers said they were understaffed.
Understaffed.
Under 80, that I think the number was actually 82%. Can you imagine?
No. Yes. Under 82.
82%. And it's a staggering number for us. But I think those of us that work in the industry have been talking about this for years. And I think we were not shielded from what happened in the last couple of years with the staffing crisis.
So I just want to make it clear to folks what understaffing actually means. It's not that you have to wait for your hamburger a little longer. If you call 911 and there are not enough people to answer your call or your text, that means you're either going to get a busy signal or voicemail. It's going to be longer to process your emergency. And as I always say, if your house is literally burning down, if grandma's having a heart attack, or if a bad guy just, is running away, there's going to be a delay, and the house may burn down. Grandma is not going to get the care she needs, and the bad guy escapes. So it is relevant. This isn't some nice to have. This is literally life or death. So 82% vacancies. The study did a lot of deeper dive as to why. So why don't you go into that? There were a lot of different reasons.
Sure, there was a lot. But I think the main thing that we see here is definitely pay. Pay came up a lot, that the call takers, dispatchers, communicators all felt that they maybe were not getting paid matching the type of work we do. You just listen to the kind of scenarios you just said, Senator. These are life or death. We make these decisions every day, multiple times a day over the phone. The other thing is just the stress, right? If you don't have the right amount of people working, what do you do with the people that's working? You overwork them. They're having to come in on overtime. They're having to take more calls at one time. And so the stress level, I think 75% of the participants said that they were overly stressed.
So you're right. And 75% was the number for stress, outranking wages, which was 65%. So yes, we don't pay them enough, but stress is even bigger challenge.
Absolutely. I always talk about, with call takers and dispatchers, and being that I answer phones for almost a decade, is you're stressed and you're hearing someone else's stress and you're trying to get them help, and that just adds on top. And so that may be a reason why we have this revolving door of people leaving that actually do make it into the center.
Yes. So, and it's not the sort of thing you could hire someone and put them under a headset right away. So my my learning was that it takes 8 to 12 months to get someone in fully trained and then on the head under a headset themselves. That's a long trajectory, a long delay to hurry up and get these 911 centers fully staffed.
Absolutely. And I think that's why it's very important that 911 centers have the training to get this done, right? Because if you don't have the right type of training, you have individuals come in, they're not resourced, they're stressed, and guess what they're going to do? They're probably going to leave. And so
Yes.
you're absolutely right. That is the average amount of time, about a year.
So they talked about so staff burnout and mental health and PTSD, the post-traumatic stress disorder. Now in Maryland, one of the aspects of one of the laws that I sponsored and passed was about access to mental health. There is still a stigma, and we want to make sure that no one has to ask their boss to see a therapist, that they can go directly and get the care they need. How big a difference? How can we make sure we're taking care of our 911 specialists?
I think, I love to use you as an example, just having the support, having a champion, a cheerleader that is at those levels that can actually go for us and speak up for us, because I have found in this career, we seem to be the quietest of first responders, right? We've taken on a lot of that and we're not speaking. We've gotten better at it.
Yeah.
And you're right, mental health is huge. I think the stigma is slowly being, lifted, and we're getting better at it. And I'll tell you really quickly about a survey. There was a study done years ago, and I wish I could find it. If I do, I will share it with you. But they found that call takers and dispatchers had vicarious PTSD, or they're more susceptible to it, because we hear the call and we physically can do nothing to help, right? We're talking, we're trying to teach you how to do CPR, we're trying to do all of this while getting responders on the way. Responders get out there, they obviously suffer too from seeing it, but they are able to put their hands on and start and help. And so that is huge for us in the industry.
That was my next question. So the outcome, the firefighters get to put out the fire and save the day, and the police get to catch the bad guy, and the paramedics get to perform CPR or deliver the baby or whatever. People under the headset don't know. And there's a story, and I'm going to pause if someone is really squeamish, walk away for a second. But there is a buddy of mine who was under the headset for several decades, who took a call from a woman who returned home to find her daughter hanging. And she had to talk her through trying to help her cut her daughter down. And when that was unsuccessful, she had to hold her up by her legs. And I can't, she's too heavy, I can't do it. And she's like, we're moms, we're strong, we can do it. Most of the time, the 911 specialist would never find out what happened from that traumatic event. In this particular case, she did follow up, and miraculously, she found that the daughter had lived. And she literally helped save her life, which is just extraordinary. But most times, you're reliving and you don't know, and yeah, so that's a challenge. So GIS, Geographic Information System, helping to locate where the call is coming from. Carbyne does some of this. And as I often talk about, there are 3 people who died in my district when 911 failed. And one of them was Carl Henn, who I named my first big bill after, a wonderful, fabulous Rockville resident who was struck by lightning in a freak thunderstorm, and he later died when all the 911 lines were busy. But GIS, the Geographic Information System, being able to find the person with the emergency is a huge challenge. Why don't you talk about how technology is improving and what Carbyne is doing on that?
Sure. So actually, when I started years ago, almost no one had a cell phone. There were car phones. And so to have a cell phone wasn't part of the original build of 911. 911 is a little over 50 years old right now. And some of the architecture and the stand-up that is being used across the center is still based off of landlines. And so once you had the influx of use of cellular networks, right? Our providers, our FCC, our communication entities.
FCC, the Federal Trade Commission.
Federal Trade Commission, sorry
Uh-huh.
about that. Our Federal Trade Commission, they put in rules, regulations to try and help with the 911. So it has gotten better, right? But
Yes.
what you have now is we still have 911 calls coming in. Either they're phase one, which means they're coming in off of an actual location, or they're coming in off of a tower versus the actual handheld where that phone is.
Yep.
We do have different services now and products that help us locate, but it still isn't 100%,
Nope.
right? We need it to be 100% because the number one thing that you're taught in 911 to get is the location. If I
Yes.
can get the location, even if the phone hangs up, I don't get you, I can get someone there to help you.
Yes. So, so there's x-axis and y-axis, and then there's z-axis, which is the height. And so whether it was the shooting in the Las Vegas hotel room or whether one of the larger employers in my district, there was someone who called, said, I think I'm having a heart attack. And they sent paramedics to building 1, and cleaning staff found his dead body 10 hours later in building 3. And it was because of the lack of accuracy. And in Maryland, especially with our borders, there was a beautiful teenage boy who died in the Potomac River when they couldn't locate him. And so that's huge. And so, yeah.
Oh, yeah, it absolutely is. And I'll tell you that some of the technological fixes to that is using all of the different GIS, the different Wi-Fi devices, the cellular device to find out where you are. So for instance, like our customers, when they get calls, they pick up the location of the phone. They're picking up the location that is fed through GIS.
Yes.
And we have a location is able to pinpoint. Again, not 100%, but we're getting very close to it, very close to it.
So one of the challenges in a 911 center is the volume of calls. Now, you said a few minutes ago about half being emergency and half being non-emergency. Now, DC, like 6 counties in Maryland, has a 311 center. So is that what you're talking about? Or is this also the reference to missed dials, butt dials or something, and someone calling 911 by accident?
No, you're correctly right. I'm talking about 311 versus 911. So our 311 call volume was a little over 2 million, I think, in 2021, and our 911 was 1.8 million. But the survey actually did show, respondents said that they have an over amount of missed dials. And I don't know the number yet, but it was high. It was a very high number that they said they suffer from missed dials. And I'll tell you just from experience, that is a nuisance. And it's not that our citizens or our visitors are calling 911 haphazardly.
Sure.
It can be what you call butt dials, where people dial 911 by mistake. These are phones that don't work that still call 911, and so it can present a hindrance to true 911 calls.
Right. Well, and there's the, little Joey who calls because their kitty is caught in the tree, which is not a 911 call. It's a perfectly lovely 311 call. But yeah. So as you may know, I've been working for the last several years to create a statewide 311 system in Maryland. And now we've been talking about merging 311 and 211 so that we can really provide good wraparound services and lighten the load on our 911 centers.
Absolutely. Sorry. When your residents have an option, they do tend to pick the right option. When I've been in jurisdictions before where there was no 311. And so the only number that did answer 24/7 was 911. And unfortunately, you had individuals calling that. So great. I really hope that comes to fruition. That does give your residents and visitors some options to call for non-emergency.
Thank you. Let's talk for a sec about 988. Because so many people are not even aware of it yet. It went live in July of 2022, and it is a suicide and crisis hotline. Why don't you talk about the impact of that on 911?
Sure. So first of all, if you hear background, I'm so sorry. My neighbor is putting in a deck. But yes, 988 is great. It is much needed. I was very happy when the United States went live with that at the beginning of last year or summer of last year. So 988 is, and it is the suicide hotline, right? We used to have an 800 number, and I think the understanding was let's do a 3-digit number. People remember 911 and 988. And so most jurisdictions You call 988, you get your local suicide group, whether that's behavioral health, like for instance in DC, it goes to your behavioral health, and they get you the resources. And Senator, really quickly, I'll just say this was really important because, as you know, after 2020 and we had the whole social justice reckoning, we had the whole mental health, making sure we're sending officers out to things that they should go out to, right? Do you want to present a gun to a mental health crisis?
Absolutely.
And so, absolutely not. And so, to keep people from calling 911, because that's what we send, right? We're sending police, fire, and EMS. Having that access to call 988 to get the right service is important.
And just to be clear, yes, it's a suicide hotline, but it's also crisis hotline. So if you just need to talk to somebody, don't hesitate. Call 988 or your local outlet. So 80% in your study, going back to the study, 80% of the 911 centers indicate that they are struggling to hire. Have you seen best practices? Who's doing it well? Who's doing it right and succeeding in hiring?
Sure. So I have to give a shout out to DC again, but because they just started an academy where they actually are reaching out to schools, right? And they're having individuals
schools as in high schools or
high schools and colleges, right? Which is super important because really, when you think about it, even when I was growing up, no one really said I want to be a 911 call taker when I grew up. I want to be a police officer. I want to be a firefighter. And so we're really making 911 a career. I made a career out of it. Mm-hmm. So that is number one. Another thing that I'm seeing is money. Money is always important. And
totally.
So putting out bonuses, always. Putting out bonuses is really important. And then the other thing is retention. Mm-hmm. Why are they leaving? Can we keep the ones we have? Knowledge goes when they leave. Yes. And so really focusing on your employees that are there now, catering to their needs as best as you can, to make sure that you keep that knowledge base there and keep those that are loyal in the center and not let them leave, because that's another problem that we have is with attrition.
So I'm going to give a shout out to Anne Arundel County Executive Stuart Pittman, who did a $5,000 basically signing bonus for new 911 specialists. And I think it's having an impact there. And in part, it was after a baby wasn't breathing and her mom took it was like 14 minutes or something to get a reply. So they got it. It was a wake-up call that luckily her child was fine, but that's terrifying. So what happens when somebody calls and they get voicemail or a busy signal? Talk about that if you would, please, because the system is understaffed.
Absolutely. So most 911 centers now have some type of recording where they'll come in and say, all your call takers are busy. Please hold the line, and please hold the line if you have an emergency. It's tempting for you to hang up the phone when you're on the call because you want to call back and get online, but we ask that you don't do that because it puts you back in queue. There are, say, 13 call takers in a normal call center, medium-sized call center. If there's a big accident on the highway and 15 people call, which could happen, unfortunately, all 13 of those call takers are handling them those calls. The average 911 call takes 2 minutes. They're in that call. They're getting the information. They drop the call. They're going to get to your call. Right. So there are things in place. We see things coming with next generation 911, like call triage, where the system is able to actually say this call is coming from this specific incident and how we can handle it. And we can give even more messaging back to the caller. Are you calling about the call on 295? We're on the way out there. Do you want to stay on the line? Those type of things. But I do think, like you said earlier, Senator, having a 311 and having a non-emergency number also helps with that call volume so you don't see people on hold.
Yes. So I've always been amazed, and it goes back to our geographic information systems, which is if there are, as you said, a crash on the Beltway and 50 people call because they want to be good citizens and, good civic activists, and 49 of them are saying there's a crash on the Beltway, and one in a nearby neighborhood says my husband is having a heart attack. You want to be able to find that one and process the other 49 in a kind, patient, and brief way.
Absolutely.
So sometimes I talked about the hanging. Sometimes The courageous women and men under the headset, our 911 specialists, listen to a suicide, listen to a beating, listening to just horrible things happening in their ears. What do we do to make sure, as part of our retention and care of these folks, what's best practices and how can we do it better to give them sort of some time to capture, get their equilibrium back and all that?
Absolutely. So there's three parts to that I like to talk about when we talk about mental health, because I've taken those calls. I've had people die on the phone with me, and I think about that a lot, even 20, 25 years later.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, training is number one. So when you're bringing individuals in, when you're having a really solid training program and helping them know what to expect,
yes,
right? Having the right type of training, giving them the right type of skills to respond to that. So training is number one. But
yes,
ultimately, no one can really deal with that when you take a call of a baby not breathing or something like that. The second part is just being really attuned at your supervisory and manager level of your call takers. Most 911 centers that I talk to now, if they know their call taker has taken a traumatic call, more traumatic than normal, they pull them off the phone, right? Go take a break. A lot of 911 centers have things like quiet rooms for the call taker to be. You don't want to go into the lunchroom, right, after you've taken a horrible call, right? So there are different places like that. And then lastly, we have services in our governments, our jurisdictions, right? You have the employee assistance programs, EAP programs that you do. There are a lot of, they call them CISM teams, which is critical incident stress management teams. You see this a lot in police and fire, but you're starting to see it more in the 911 center, where peers get together after a traumatic incident and they talk it through with the call taker, making sure that they have access to resources, seeing if they need more time off and things like that. So we are progressing. We've gotten much better, but I just think being aware of what we're dealing with and addressing it as it comes up.
So the challenge with giving people time off, obviously, is if you're already doing mandatory overtime because you're understaffed. Yeah, that's tough.
Absolutely.
I have a few more questions. So we passed a law in Maryland, finally, with increased penalties for swatting, making phony phone calls saying there's an active shooter at ABC Elementary School and blah, blah. But we have not yet been able to pass TDOS and DDoS, which is jamming the phone lines either through phone calls or digitally. Can you talk about that and why it's important? Maybe you can say it better than I've succeeded in doing it for my colleagues.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. So that, when I was a 911 director for a couple of decades, that is something that kept me up at night, was TDoS attacks and cybersecurity attacks. Because if you really think about it, if you want to take down public safety in any jurisdiction, you get them to not talk to each other. And we all know, Senator, whether they talk through the 911 center, which is usually the dispatch center also.
Right.
And so and I'll give you some examples. We had a denial of service attack in DC, and because our call volume is so high, we had hundreds of calls come in. Now, I know my IT team responded and it did not take us down, but imagine in a two-seater 911 center, which is the majority of 911 centers. They're not DC size.
Two-seaters, as in two 911 specialists, that's it. Oh.
Two-seaters, two 911. So imagine 100 calls coming in at one time.
Not possible.
And then, right, a school bus has an accident and they can't get through to 911. It's absolutely paramount. I think it is one of the things it is that black swan that, we don't think about enough, but we need to have those mitigative efforts like what you're talking about, that you're pushing in Maryland, those mitigative efforts, because we have to prepare now, as we see in the rest of the world, in the corporate world, that these things do happen and they can be detrimental.
Yes, no question. Well, as I knew, you'd make it way more compelling than I can. So thank you. Two questions about technology before we wrap up. One, there's what I call PSAP in a box, which is being able to work remotely. So many people are able to work remotely and so many people can't. But 911, there are issues around technology and privacy that are critically important. But why don't you talk about what Carbyne is doing, or what you believe is the future of being able to work remotely on 911?
Sure. So I'll tell you, about 5 to 10 years ago, around that time, the big word of cloud came about, and everyone in 911 and public safety technology was like, we don't know what this is. We don't like it. We like our server room. But after 2020, after COVID, cloud has really become the go-to.
Yeah.
And that's because it's very flexible. You can do things like work from home with 911. We have the city in our cause that includes some of your Maryland PSAPs, but in Alexandria,
in the Council of Government.
Council of Governments, yes. Our Metropolitan Washington's Council of Government. So we do have one or two PSAPs in that group that have actually been able to work from home with their 911 call takers through setups like the cloud, where your server and everything is in the cloud. Carbyne definitely supports that. We also, I think the other thing that's really important when you're talking about being able to have a PSAP in a box is not just necessarily for the remote worker, but it's for the catastrophe that could happen in your 911 center, which I have been a part of, and they can't physically come in, right? 911 still needs to happen. And so being able to have the 911 center, being able to have your call takers work from home or work from some other location is huge. Really quickly, I'll add on to what you said about the privacy. I felt that way too. But one study that we did, and it's a little bit of this is in the survey, it talked about a great deal of 911 calls are not dire emergency calls. And so finding a way to have those call takers and dispatchers work from home, but handle those less stressful calls could also be a model that a dispatcher or a dispatch center could follow.
I lied when I said I had two questions. I have three. Language access is really important to me and to my district. Gaithersburg and Rockville are two of the most linguistically diverse cities in the nation. And Carbyne actually does a lot with that. So someone calls 911 and they speak Korean and I don't speak Korean and I'm under the headset. You guys have it so that I can respond in English and they'll hear it in Korean?
Absolutely. So I will tell you this. I have been with Carbyne for about 7-8 months now, and this is one of my favorite features.
Totally.
When I got briefed on this, I was like, next gen 911, we are here. So yes, basically now the greater majority of 911 centers, when they get someone that speaks a language other than English, they transfer them over to a
language line. Right.
Yeah, we've heard stories that it's between 7 and 10 minutes is how long it takes to process the call. But the technology you're talking about that we have at Carbyne is two-way translation. So in a nutshell, someone calls 911. As they start speaking in a foreign language, the system, machine learning, picks up the language, starts transcribing it to the call taker in English. Then when I start speaking back in English, it audibly translates my English into their language.
It gives me chills. I mean,
amazing.
That is so fantastic. And faster means more lives saved, fewer houses burning down, fewer bad guys getting away. I mean, all of the things. So I am blown away by that. That's very exciting. So how far along in the process is that? Is it actually being used now? And what's the error rate and stuff?
Yeah, so we have some of our customers now that are early adopters, which is normal in our industry. We like to do things early adopters. And so that actual full feature, so it's called GA, which is generally available to everyone. We're looking at Q2 of next year. It's amazing technology.
Huge, huge. Okay. So artificial intelligence is in the news all the time, AI. And it's done in creepy ways a lot in terms of actors and singers and blah, blah, blah. But how is artificial intelligence? What's the potential for it being used to triage the phone calls and get the really urgent ones to a 911 specialist right away, and then manage the others in a slower way?
Absolutely. So I think there's a couple things here that I love to talk about because I like to say when I was wrong. I was one of those people, I didn't love AI in the beginning. I was also on the bandwagon of they're going to take our job. But I will say over the last 2 or 3 years, I have realized that this is just the way the world is going. And the type of AI that we're talking about in 911 could never replace the people. It will definitely supplement the person's work, right? And so, for instance, the AI I just spoke about with the language, that is AI. That is machine learning. It is a AI function that picks it up. The call triage that you're talking about, I'll give you really quickly how that works. So accident happens. You, as the director or the manager of your center, say, if I have an accident here, all my call takers are busy. We have already put the call in for dispatch. And if anyone calls within, say, 25 meters of that accident, tell them we got it. They can stay on the phone if it's if it's something else they want to add.
Right.
But if not, we're on the way. That is what we need here.
That's miraculous. That's amazing. Okay, I love that. Well, Karima Holmes, it is time for your Fast Five. 5 quick questions, 5 quick answers to let folks get to know more about you. Question number 1, what is the best advice a mentor has ever given you?
You are better than you think you are.
That's great. I love that. Question 2, what's your favorite genre of music?
I like lo-fi chill. L-O-F-I chill. It's no lyrics, just laid back.
Lovely. Question 3, what is your favorite cuisine?
Asian, hands down. Japanese, Thai, anything Asian.
All right. We'll have to go out for sushi sometime or something. Question 4, what is a favorite thing you love to do on a day off?
I do yoga faithfully just about every morning.
Nice. Good for you. And question 5, Karima Holmes, 911 expert extraordinaire with Carbyne now, working on Next Gen 911. What is your hidden secret superpower? What is a skill or talent you have, something you're really good at that most folks can't do?
I am really good at reading the room. I can usually walk into a room and I already can look across people and already know who's the leader, who's the one that's nervous, who's the one I need to sit next to. I just usually do really good reading the room and reading people.
I love that. That's a great answer. And that makes me say you need to run for office someday.
Thank you, Senator.
What a pleasure to have you as my stand-in here. And before we wrap up, not only do I want to deeply thank you for your service in public safety and in 911 specifically, but also just sending a prayer out to everyone at Carbyne, to everyone in Israel, to CEO Amir Elichai, who couldn't be on because of the attacks in Israel. And let's just pray for safety and for those who have been kidnapped and stuff to be returned safely to their families. So thank you, Karima. Thank you for taking time to kibitz today. And thanks for all you have done and all you will do to keep folks safe.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator.